I never thought I'd end up working the night shift at an indoor water park. Sounds fun, right? Slides, pools, lazy rivers. In reality? It's like babysitting a giant, wet, neon playground after hours, and sometimes, the playground fights back. On paper, my job was simple: sit in the control room, watch the security cameras, make sure the pumps didn't fail, and call maintenance if something broke. Oh, and lock the gates so no one sneaks in. Easy money. Most nights it was just me, a thermos of gas station coffee, and the faint hum of water filters echoing through the building. But here's the thing: water parks at night are creepy. The whole place is dark except for the safety lights. The slides look like massive black worms coiled around each other. The pools shimmer faintly like they're alive. And the air, humid, heavy, always carries this weird smell of chlorine and cotton candy, even at 3 a.m. It's like the park never fully sleeps. For the first few weeks, I thought my biggest problem would be boredom. Then the trespassers started showing up. The first was a group of teenagers who thought it'd be epic to sneak in after midnight and ride the slides naked. I spotted them on the cameras, sprinting around like maniacs, their pale butts flashing like fireflies under the security lights. When I called the cops, one kid panicked and got stuck halfway down the biggest slide. They had to cut him out of the fiberglass tube like a cork from a wine bottle. The cops laughed so hard they nearly forgot to arrest him. Another time, a drunk guy in his 40s climbed the fence, stripped down to his boxers, and tried to cannonball into the wave pool. The problem? We drained the pool every night for cleaning. He belly flopped onto bare concrete. Broke his nose, knocked out 2 teeth, and still tried to argue with paramedics that he nailed the landing. Those nights were funny in a WTF did I just see kind of way. Stories you tell your buddies over beers. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before something worse happened. You can only watch so many idiots climb fences before you realize, one day, someone isn't walking out. And I was right. Because one night, a group broke in that wasn't just there to be stupid. They came with alcohol, with drugs, with anger simmering under their skin. And by sunrise, the park wasn't just trashed, someone was on a stretcher, and I was the one everyone blamed. Most nights weren't complete chaos. Usually, it was just me, the cameras, and the sound of sloshing water echoing through an empty building. If you've never been in a water park alone at 2 a.m., let me tell you, it's surreal. The slides creak in the dark, the lazy river laps at the walls, and the wave pool has this eerie rhythm, like the heartbeat of some giant beast. It's peaceful for about 10 minutes. Then you remember you're the only living soul in a place designed to hold thousands, and it stops being peaceful real fast. Still, boredom wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing was the guests who decided rules didn't apply to them. One night, I caught a couple on the cameras sneaking into the kiddie play area. At first, I thought maybe they were thrill seekers wanting a midnight slide. Nope. They were having full-on adult fun in the shallow splash pool surrounded by plastic water cannons shaped like cartoon frogs. I had to be the guy to call the cops and explain why 2 naked people were going at it on a toddler's pirate ship. That report practically wrote itself. Then there was the bachelor party. These guys scaled the fence like trained commandos, hauling coolers full of beer and blasting music from a speaker. They took turns racing down the slides headfirst, almost colliding mid-tube. When security finally showed up, half of them dove into the lazy river to hide. The water's 3 feet deep, crystal clear, and lit up like an aquarium. Watching them lie flat on the bottom, holding their breath like Navy SEALs, was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But the weirdest trespasser had to be the guy with the emotional support, Ferret. I swear I'm not making this up. He walked in through an unlocked side door at 4 a.m., Ferret on his shoulder, and told me he needed the slides to calm his anxiety. When I said no, he started arguing that ADA laws covered ferret rides. It took 2 security guards and an animal control officer to get both him and the ferret out of there. I collected stories like that, stacking them up in my brain. Each one funnier, or dumber, than the last. My friends loved hearing them, but I always laughed with this edge of dread. Because with every broken nose, every naked trespasser, every hiding bachelor, I knew it was building towards something bigger. And then came the night that proved me right. Not just a couple of drunk kids. Not a naked guy or a rogue pet owner. This time, it was a whole group. They didn't sneak in for a thrill, they stormed in like they owned the place. They had alcohol, they had drugs, and they had no fear of getting caught. That night, the water park stopped being funny. And it almost stopped being a job. That night started like any other, dead quiet, me half asleep in the control room with cheap coffee and stale chips, watching the monitors flicker between empty slides and motionless pools, until around 1 a.m. when the cameras caught movement near the back fence. At first, I thought it was another couple of dumb kids trying to get a free midnight swim, but when I zoomed in, my stomach dropped. It wasn't 2 people, it was a whole group, maybe 10 or 12, hauling coolers and backpacks like they were setting up camp. I called security backup, but of course, it was just me until someone could get there, so I watched them slip in, laughing loud enough to echo through the empty halls, heading straight for the wave pool. Within minutes, they had the music blasting on a portable speaker, bottles popping, some already stripping down to their underwear to dive into a pool that wasn't even filled all the way yet because the pumps were in night mode. One guy slipped, cracked his head on the edge, and his friends just laughed, dragging him back into the water like it was part of the party. I radioed my manager, no answer. I called the cops on hold for 5 minutes while dispatch asked if they had weapons. No, I said, but they're drunk and tearing the place apart. Meanwhile, I watched one girl climbing the scaffolding for the highest slide, beer in hand, ready to go down dry plastic with no water running. If she launched herself down that thing, she'd break half her bones before she hit the bottom. My chest was tight, heart pounding, because I knew I couldn't stop them all, not alone, not without backup, and yet if something happened, guess whose name was on the incident report? Mine. And as I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, I realized this wasn't going to be just another funny story for later. This was the night it was all going to blow up. I kept staring at the monitors, my palms sweating, because I knew if I stayed in the control room doing nothing and someone got hurt, it would land on me, but if I went down there alone, I'd be outnumbered 10-1 and probably get my kicked. Still, I couldn't just sit there, so I grabbed the radio, shoved the flashlight in my belt like it was a weapon, and walked toward the wave pool area. The sound hit me first, music so loud it rattled the glass walls, laughter and screaming bouncing off the tiles, the splash of bodies hitting water they weren't supposed to be in. When I turned the corner, I saw them in full force, guys pounding vodka straight from the bottle, girls shrieking as they jumped into the shallow pool, someone climbing the lifeguard chair to dance like it was a club. One dude had dragged a table into the water and was standing on it, holding his beer like a trophy, screaming, "This is our kingdom," while everyone cheered. My stomach twisted. This wasn't dumb fun anymore. It was chaos. I stepped forward, tried to keep my voice steady, and yelled, "You all need to leave right now. The cops are on their way." They laughed at me. One guy, tall, built like a linebacker, walked up dripping wet and got right in my face. His breath smelled like whiskey and cheap weed. "Who the H*** are you? Pool police?" His friends roared with laughter. I repeated myself, louder this time, but he shoved me in the chest, not hard enough to knock me down, but enough to send the message. A couple of his buddies started chanting "Pool police. Pool police," while the rest kept drinking like nothing was happening. I tried the radio again, desperate for backup, but all I got was static. Dispatch still had me on hold from earlier, and I realized I was truly on my own. Then it got worse. The girl who had climbed the scaffolding was at the top of the slide now, waving her arms like a daredevil. Her friends egged her on, chanting her name, filming on their phones. My blood turned cold. If she went down, dry plastic would shred her skin, maybe break her spine. I sprinted toward the bottom of the slide, shouting for her to stop, but before I could get close, she launched herself. The sound of her body scraping down that empty tube was like sandpaper, her screams bouncing through the whole park, until she shot out the bottom, skidded across the dry concrete, and slammed into the sidewall. The music stopped. Everyone froze. She wasn't moving. For a second, the whole group just stared, unsure if it was a joke, until one of the guys shouted her name and ran over. I dropped to my knees beside her, checked for breathing. Thank God, she was still alive, but her arm was twisted at an angle that made my stomach flip. Her skin was raw, bleeding from friction burns, and she groaned in pain. I grabbed my radio again, screaming into it for paramedics, but the group wasn't looking at her anymore. They were looking at me. The big linebacker guy grabbed my shirt and snarled, "This is your fault, man. You're supposed to be in charge here." My jaw dropped. My fault? I was the only one trying to stop this disaster. But the rest of the group started nodding, shouting, "Yeah, he let her climb. He didn't do anything. He just stood there." Suddenly I wasn't just the worker trying to help. I was the villain. When the sirens finally blared outside and the paramedics rushed in, I thought maybe things would calm down, but instead the group turned even uglier. Two guys blocked the EMTs, screaming about lawsuits, yelling that the staff had endangered their friend. The cops had to pull them back, and in the middle of it all, I stood there shaking, knowing deep down what was about to happen. The girl was hurt, her friends were furious, and someone had to take the blame. And that someone was me. When the paramedics finally got to her, I stepped back, shaking, my hands covered in her blood where I tried to hold her still. They worked fast, wrapping her arm, checking her vitals, strapping her to a stretcher. She cried out in pain, weak little sobs that echoed through the whole building, and the rest of the group stood there filming, yelling, swearing at me like I was the one who pushed her down the slide. The cops came in right behind the EMTs, 2 of them, looking tired and annoyed like this was just another drunk call on a Friday night. They asked who was in charge, and every single person pointed at me. I started stammering, I'm the night operator. I called for help. I tried to stop them, but no one wanted to hear it. One of the cops pulled me aside, notebook ready, and said, so explain why you let a group of underage drunk kids into a closed park. My jaw dropped. I didn't let them in. They broke in. I called dispatch, I called my boss, nobody answered, and he cut me off with a sigh. Save it. We'll get statements from the others. I watched in disbelief as he walked over to the group, who were now crying, hugging each other, spinning this whole story about how they just wanted some fun and how I'd been there, watching, doing nothing while their friend nearly died. It was insane. I had been screaming myself hoarse trying to get them out. But to the cops, I was just the lone employee versus a dozen drunk witnesses all saying the same thing. By sunrise, the girl was in the hospital, the cops had filed a report, and my manager finally showed up looking like he'd been dragged out of bed. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what happened. He just rubbed his forehead and said, do you realize the liability this creates for us? I lost it. Liability? She could have died. I called you 5 times, I called dispatch, I tried to stop them, he cut me off, his voice low and cold. It doesn't matter what you tried. It matters how it looks. And right now, it looks like you failed. I wanted to punch him, scream, something, but all I could do was stand there shaking while he chewed me out in front of the cops. He told them the park would cooperate, that appropriate disciplinary action would be taken, and I knew exactly what that meant. I was about to be hung out to dry. That night, the story was already on the local news, girl injured in Waterpark break-in and staff member under investigation. My name wasn't in the headline, but inside the building, everybody whispered it. By the next shift, co-workers wouldn't even look at me. Management told me not to make a scene and put me on temporary leave. Temporary leave with no pay. I went home, sat in my tiny apartment staring at the wall, replaying everything over and over. If I'd stayed in the control room, they'd say I ignored it. If I went down and fought harder, maybe I'd be in the hospital instead of her. Either way, the end result was the same, they were making me the scapegoat. Then the phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up, and a woman's voice, sharp and furious, tore into me, you're the one who let my daughter get hurt. You're the one who should be in the hospital, not her. It was the girl's mom. I tried to explain, to say I'd called 911, that I tried to stop it, but she wasn't listening. She screamed that she'd make sure I paid for this, that she'd sue me personally if the park didn't. And before I could respond, she hung up. That's when I realized this wasn't just a bad night at work. This was the beginning of the end. My job, my name, maybe even my freedom, it was all on the line now. The next few days were pure hell. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, unknown numbers, reporters leaving voicemails, strangers on Facebook calling me a monster. Somehow my full name had leaked, maybe from the cops, maybe from someone at the park, and now I was the Waterpark worker who let a girl nearly die. Articles used stock photos of the park with my name plastered underneath like I was some criminal mastermind. They didn't mention the group was drunk. They didn't mention they broke in. No, the narrative was clean and simple. A girl almost lost her life because I didn't do my job. When I went back to the park to pick up my last paycheck, the stares burned through me. Co-workers I'd laughed with on smoke breaks suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. One of them muttered, "Man, why didn't you just shut the gate tighter?" I wanted to scream. The gate was fine. They'd climbed the damn fence. But it didn't matter. To them, I was already guilty. Then came the meeting with corporate. 3 suits sat across the table, notepad in hand, fake sympathy painted on their faces. "We just need your statement for our records," one said, sliding a document toward me. I skimmed it and nearly laughed out loud. It basically said I admitted to being negligent, to failing to secure the park, to ignoring procedure. "Sign it," they said calmly, "and we'll keep this internal. No legal trouble for you." I pushed the paper back. This is a lie. I called for help. I followed every protocol. I'm not signing. Their smiles vanished. One of them leaned forward and said, voice flat, then don't be surprised if the DA takes interest. And don't expect us to cover your legal fees. I walked out shaking, the weight of it crashing down. They weren't just hanging me out to dry. They were pushing me straight into the fire. That night, I sat in my apartment with the blinds closed, TV off, trying not to lose my mind. Then came a knock at the door. My stomach twisted. I peeked through the peephole and froze. It was a news crew. Camera, microphone, the works. They were knocking and shouting my name, asking if I felt guilty, if I had anything to say to the victim's family. I backed away, heart racing, until they finally left. But the next day, the footage was online. Me, standing in the shadows of my own apartment, looking guilty as hell. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the cops called. They wanted me back at the station for further questioning. Sitting in that fluorescent-lit room again, one of the detectives leaned forward and said, we've had several consistent witness statements saying you stood by while underage drinking occurred, that you failed to intervene, and that your inaction directly led to the victim's injuries. Do you have anything else to add? I wanted to laugh, to cry, to flip the damn table. Instead, I just said, yeah. I tried. I called for help. I begged them to leave. But one guy had a broken arm, a girl almost broke her neck, and somehow I'm the villain? The detective scribbled something down, not even looking at me. We'll forward everything to the DA. You'll be notified if charges are filed. That was it. No comfort, no reassurance, just a cold goodbye. I walked out into the parking lot, the sun too bright, my head spinning. My life wasn't just falling apart, it was being dismantled piece by piece. And the worst part? Everyone seemed perfectly fine with it. Because at the end of the day, somebody had to be blamed. And I was the easiest target. The official letter came a week later. A thick white envelope slid under my door with my name typed across the front. I already knew what it was before I opened it, and my hands still shook tearing through the paper. Notice of civil action. The girl's family was suing the Waterpark, and my name was right there in black and white, employee on duty, responsible for oversight. I sat on my couch staring at those words for what felt like hours. I thought about my bank account, about the pile of overdue bills on the kitchen counter, about the fact that I didn't even own a car worth suing me for. How could I fight this? How could I even afford a lawyer? Corporate sure as hell wasn't going to help. They'd already made it clear I was the sacrifice, the one they'd toss under the bus to protect the brand. I'd been erased from the staff schedule, my employee login disabled, my emails cut off. I didn't even exist to them anymore, except as the guy they could point at in court. I called around for lawyers, and the first three basically told me the same thing: without strong evidence or witnesses, this case will eat you alive. And retainers start at $5,000. I didn't have 500. By the fourth call, I was ready to give up when a gruff voice on the other end said, "Come in tomorrow." No promises, but I'll hear you out. His name was Jackson, a local defense attorney who looked like he hadn't smiled since the 90s. When I told him everything, from the teenager skinny dipping to the girl skidding down the slide like sandpaper, he leaned back, arms crossed, and said, "Classic corporate dump." They knew something like this could happen, and they kept you alone on night shift without backup. They're hanging you because you're cheap. Yeah, but the family, I started. They're grieving, they're angry, they want someone's head. He cut me off. The hotel's lawyers will drag this out for months, maybe years. If we fight, we'll fight dirty too. But you need to understand, this won't just cost money. It'll cost you sleep, your reputation, maybe even your sanity. Are you ready for that? I wasn't. But what choice did I have? If I rolled over, I'd be branded guilty forever. If I fought, maybe, just maybe, I'd claw back a piece of my life. The first court date was set, and the weeks leading up to it were a nightmare. Reporters camped outside my apartment again. Strangers online kept calling me a creep who let kids nearly die. My landlord left a voicemail saying other tenants were concerned and maybe it was best if I found another place. Even my own family, people I thought would back me, told me to just apologize and move on. Move on from what? From being crucified for doing my job? The only tiny light in all this came from Miguel, the young maintenance guy who sometimes pulled night shifts with me. He showed up at my place one evening, nervously holding a six-pack. "I was there that night," he said quietly. "I saw you call dispatch. I saw you try to stop them. If they put me on the stand, I'll say it." I wanted to hug the kid. But then I remembered what happened to Rosa, how she'd folded under pressure, and I wondered if Miguel would survive the same heat. People were already threatening me, what would they do to him? Still, his words gave me a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't entirely alone. Maybe the truth could actually break through this storm of lies. But deep down, I knew how these things worked. The courtroom wasn't about truth. It was about stories. And right now, the other side had the better one, a girl with broken bones, crying parents, a dozen friends pointing their fingers at me. And me? I was just the faceless night worker who should have done more. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant, and the moment I stepped inside, I felt like I'd walked into my own execution. The girl's family was there, front row, all dressed in black like it was still a funeral. She sat with them, arm in a cast, her face pale, eyes fixed on the floor. Cameras flashed as I walked past, microphones shoved toward me with the same questions on repeat. Do you feel responsible? Why didn't you stop it? Are you prepared to apologize? I kept my head down and pushed through. Inside, the judge looked like he'd heard 1,000 cases just like mine and already wanted to get it over with. The plaintiff's lawyer opened with a story so polished it could have been a TV drama. A young woman, full of life, sneaks into a water park for a night of harmless fun. Instead of being protected, she's ignored by the one employee paid to keep her safe. Now she lives with scars she'll never forget. He paused just long enough for the jury to glance at her, and I swear I heard someone sniffle. Then came the witnesses. One after another, her friends took the stand, voices shaking as they told the same story. They begged me to help, they begged me to stop her, and I just stood there, smirking, as if I didn't care. Smirking? I nearly choked when I heard that. I was screaming myself hoarse that night, but in their version, I was some cold-blooded monster letting them suffer for kicks. The worst was when Rosa, the housekeeper who used to bring me coffee on slow nights, took the stand. She wouldn't even look at me. She said she heard from others that I'd ignored calls for help before. Lies stacked on lies, and everyone hit me like a punch to the ribs. My lawyer Jackson objected where he could, pointing out inconsistencies, hammering on the fact that all these kids were drunk and trespassing. But the jury didn't see drunk kids. They saw clean, polite young adults in pressed clothes, coached to look like victims. Every time Jackson pressed too hard, the judge told him to ease up. Every time the other side cried about lost innocence, the judge just nodded. When it was finally my turn to take the stand, I felt like I was walking into a trap. Jackson told me to stay calm, to answer plainly, not to lose my temper. So I sat there, sweaty palms pressed against the wood, and told the truth. I called dispatch, I called my boss, I begged them to stop, I tried to block the slide, I did everything one man could do against 12 drunk kids. But when the plaintiff's lawyer cross-examined me, he twisted every word. So you admit you saw them drinking and did nothing? I called. Yes or no? Yes, but. So you admit you saw the victim climbing and failed to physically stop her? I couldn't. Yes or no? Yes, but. That was all the jury heard. Yes. 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 By the time I stepped down, I felt hollow, like I'd been stripped of my own skin. I sat next to Jackson, staring at the table, and whispered, "We're screwed, aren't we?" He didn't answer right away. Then he leaned in and said, "Not yet. But if we don't find someone to blow their story apart, you're toast." That night, I went home to find another note taped to my door. No words this time, just a drawing, me, stick figure style, standing by a slide with a stick figure girl falling to her death. Underneath, 3 letters, LOL. I ripped it down, my hands shaking, and realized the truth didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about what happened. This was about who had the better story. And right now, I was losing. By the 3rd week of hearings I was running on fumes. I barely ate, barely slept, and when I did, my dreams were always the same, the girl screaming down the dry slide, the crunch when she hit, her friends turning toward me with hate in their eyes. Every morning I dragged myself back into that courtroom feeling like I was marching toward my own burial. The plaintiff's lawyer kept hammering me, the jury kept staring at me like I was dirt, and the newspapers kept calling me the Waterpark worker who looked away. Jackson kept saying, hold on, but even his voice was starting to sound like false hope. Then, one night, just when I thought the whole thing was about to collapse on my head, Jackson called me at 11 p.m. His voice was sharp, awake, like he'd just sniffed blood. "Get down to my office right now." I thought maybe he'd found a new angle, maybe even a technicality. When I got there, he shoved a folder across his desk. Inside were photos, phone records, and a statement. My eyes widened. It was Miguel, the young maintenance kid who'd come to me before. But this time, it wasn't just his word. It was his phone. He'd recorded parts of that night. He hadn't meant to, he'd just been snapping videos on Snapchat when the group was clowning around in the lobby, bragging about breaking in, waving bottles of vodka like trophies. You could hear one guy shout, "If she breaks her neck it's on us, bro." And then laughing. Another clip showed me yelling in the background, telling them to stop, calling dispatch on speaker. His friend filmed him and captioned it with laughing emojis like it was all a joke. I stared at Jackson. Why the hell didn't he show this before? Because he was scared, Jackson said flatly. He told me tonight his mom got threatened again. But then he saw the news painting you as the devil, and he couldn't live with himself anymore. The next morning, Jackson filed it as evidence. The plaintiff's lawyer blew up, called it unreliable, said it was doctored. The judge actually frowned for once and told the jury they could consider it but with caution. Then Jackson did something I didn't expect. He called Miguel to the stand. Miguel walked in looking like he wanted to disappear, clutching his phone like it was a life raft. He testified, voice shaking, that he was there, that he saw me begging the group to leave, that he saw them laughing in my face. Jackson played the audio. The room went dead quiet as the jury heard those kids drunk and laughing about what would happen if their friend got hurt. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time I saw cracks in the jury's stone faces. They were listening. The plaintiff's lawyer tried to tear Miguel apart, accusing him of being bribed, accusing him of lying to protect me. Miguel's lip trembled, but he didn't back down. I didn't take money, he said, voice breaking. I took courage. Someone has to tell the truth. It wasn't a knockout punch. But it was the first real swing we'd landed. When court adjourned, I walked outside into the blinding sun and for once felt something other than dread. Hope. Tiny, fragile, but real. Jackson lit a cigarette and said, "They're rattled. I can see it. Now we keep pushing." But even as he spoke, I noticed a car parked across the street. Tinted windows. Engine idling. Just sitting there. My skin crawled. When I looked closer, the window rolled down an inch. I couldn't see a face, but a hand stuck out, slow, deliberate, middle finger raised. The car pulled away, and my stomach sank. Because I realized something chilling, I wasn't just fighting the family or corporate lawyers anymore. Someone else, someone with money, power, maybe even connections to the park's investors, wanted me buried. And if they couldn't do it in court, they'd do it outside. The last day of trial felt like my entire life was dangling on a thread. I hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, and my body felt hollow, like I was just a shell being dragged into that courtroom one last time. The jury filed in, stone-faced, eyes locked straight ahead. The judge cleared his throat and read the decision. The Waterpark as a company was liable for negligence. Damages would be sought against corporate insurance, but all personal claims against me were dismissed. I just sat there, frozen, as if the words didn't register. Dismissed. The weight of weeks, months, the entire nightmare hanging over my head, it was gone in a single sentence. I should have cried, should have cheered, but all I felt was numb relief washing through me like a slow wave. Jackson leaned over and whispered, "You're free. Breathe." Across the aisle, the girl's family sobbed, clinging to her casted arm. They still wanted justice, and they would get some through corporate, but the rage in their eyes told me the story wasn't over for them. They'd never forgive me, not really. To them I'd always be the villain, no matter what the verdict said. Outside, cameras swarmed again. This time the questions were sharper. Do you feel vindicated? Was this all just a cover-up? Did the jury get it wrong? Jackson pushed through with me, repeating no comment until we made it to his car. As soon as the door shut, the silence hit me so hard it hurt. That night, I walked into my apartment, blinds drawn, phone buzzing nonstop with calls and texts I ignored. I collapsed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, whispering to myself, "It's over." For the first time in months, I believed it. But later, when I went out to take the trash, I saw it again. A car idling across the street. Same tinted windows, same low hum of an engine waiting too long. My skin prickled. I froze, trash bag in hand, and then the window rolled down just enough for me to see a hand slip out, two fingers pointed at me like a gun, thumb clicking down. The car pulled off into the night. I stood there under the streetlight, breath sharp in my throat, realizing the trial had ended but the story hadn't. Corporate had taken the fall, the family had won money, and I had walked away free. But somebody out there, maybe the investors, maybe people tied to that wild group, Maybe just someone who hated how the case turned still wanted me silenced, erased, forgotten. The court had given me freedom. Real life, though? It had given me a target on my back. And I don't know which one is scarier.